This is Josh Nelson with Nelson Elder Care Law, where we help you protect yourselves and the ones you love. What do we do protection wise? We create things like trusts and different types of plans to make sure that if something happens to you or one of your loved ones, your assets are going to be protected. Whether that's from incapacity, helping you maintain your autonomy, there's three-letter federal agencies. How do we make sure that nobody's coming in and taking what you've worked so hard for? That's what we're going to talk about today. Specifically today, we're going to touch base on the last topic that we did, which was supplemental needs or special needs trusts. Whenever we talk about special needs or supplemental needs trusts, you can click back to our last week's video where we'll talk about a primer about all the different kinds. But today we're going to specifically focus on what's called a third-party special needs trust. What's a third-party special needs trust? It's a special needs trust that's created for somebody else that you care about, that you want to have some kind of resource you're going to give them, whether that be money, a house, vehicles, just an income stipend. It can be a lot of different things. But that if we don't plan for, would end up with them getting kicked off of benefits. We're going to go about 3 stories today to tell you about things that we've seen in the past that with a little bit of forethought, a little bit of planning, you can very, very effectively help keep the one that you love on the benefits that they're entitled to and they deserve without making them go broke or lose their health insurance. So remember, whenever we talk about special needs trusts, we're planning for government benefit eligibility. Whether that be somebody on Medicaid or Supplemental Security Income, what's called SSI, many of these programs have asset or income thresholds that if you go beyond, you'll get kicked off. Why is that a problem? Because if you get kicked off these programs, often your loved one's health insurance is tied to this, as well as some other things such as their monthly stipend that they may be receiving. We don't want them to get kicked out of ineligible equity housing or subdivided housing. Make sure that whenever we start talking about what the benefits they currently receive are, the people that come in and help them in their home, the people that help them in a nursing home, the people that help them get the care they need can still be paid for by the program that they work with. For many of these programs, the threshold's pretty low. Sometimes it's as low as $2,000 for something like aged, blind, and disabled Medicaid, or it could be as high as $10,000 for other government programs. But often whenever we start talking about inheritance or gifts for these people, even if it's something like a lawsuit settlement because of an injury that they achieved during an accident, it can kick them off these programs. These programs often are very hard to get back on, and so we want to make sure that we're planning ahead for it. How do we do that? It's really simple. We want to be able to give this resource to them, but not have it go to them in their own name. It can be used for their benefit, but often the money or the item itself never actually counts as a possession or something that they own. It's something that's for their benefit, but not theirs. The great benefit of this is that we can then take anything that's left over and give it to other people whenever they either get better, so they're no longer on benefits, or they pass away. One of the saddest examples that we often see of this is for children with special needs that are born or have some kind of injury or accident, or maybe a surgery goes bad whenever they're under the age of 26. Often the parents split, and then usually it's the father who leaves some kind of insurance, maybe a small one, $10,000, $15,000 to the child, and then that parent or that father passes. Now we got $10,000 or $15,000 coming to this child or young adult who will get kicked off their benefits. The way to plan against this is with what's called a supplemental needs or a special needs trust, and list that as the beneficiary of these life insurance policies rather than the child directly. This helps get around a couple problems. First, if we give an inheritance through probate to somebody that doesn't have legal capacity, whether that be because of their age or because of an illness, it has to go through what's called a guardian ad litem, which is an attorney that's going to be appointed to represent that person's interest. And what do we all know whenever we get multiple attorneys involved? It's going to be a lot of money. And so we can avoid that by creating these structures in place before we actually distribute the money to this minor or this incapacitated beneficiary. It's something that's super simple, but people just forget about. Imagine that a father passes away, leaves an insurance policy for his son who's 19, but on some kind of benefit such as SSI or some kind of disability program like Katie Beckett. And whenever they're going to go through and actually receive that money, they have to disclose that to their program. And because of that, they're going to lose their monthly stipend. So somewhere around $700 to $1,400 a month we've just lost. But the bigger portion is we've now lost their health insurance too. And depending on what kind of ailment they have or what kind of illness or disability, it could be pretty substantial to find them something like COBRA or another health insurance to pick up the tab while they're spending through this $10,000. We know that often that $10,000 is only going to last a month, maybe 2 months at that rate. And so then we have to go through the process of reapplying again. Because it's under strict scrutiny then, after you've been kicked off once, it's a lot harder to get the second time. And so we can avoid all this by making sure that your will has a supplemental needs trust in it, or that you create a standalone third-party special needs trust to help designate and protect those funds from somebody that's on some kind of government benefit. Let's look at it from a different angle. If it's not for a child that's disabled or has some kind of incapacity, it might be for a spouse. As we get older, generally our spouses are getting older with us. Unfortunately, anybody that reaches age 65 has a 67% chance, or essentially 2/3, are going to end up in some kind of care situation before they pass away. So remember, if you're over 65, you have a 2/3 chance of needing some kind of care before you pass. Well, what do we find with a couple then? It's very, very likely that at least one of them, if not both of them, is going to need some kind of care before they pass. And if that care is covered by something like Medicaid or one of these programs that help subsidize care in the home, such as like a nursing home diversion program that gives caregivers into your home, or maybe it's just the fact that you have some discount on your health insurance because you got sick a little earlier in life and you qualify for a Medicaid waiver on your Medicare insurance. If you receive too much money as an inheritance, even if it comes from your spouse, you can get kicked off those programs. And that's pretty crazy to think about it, because while your spouse was alive, your net worth was essentially the same. We treat hers and mine and his and mine the same as ours. And so why do the program limits change? The limits are different for a married couple versus a single individual. And whenever you lose your spouse, you drop down to those single individual thresholds. And so instead of being able to have something like $130,000 or a house that's exempt, maybe your threshold's all the way down to $2,000 now. Well, what that means is now we have to spend down or figure out a plan in order to help qualify for those benefits again, if we don't have something in place already. By having a supplemental needs trust in place or a third-party special needs trust, if you know that your spouse is already ill, it helps make it so that the money or the proceeds or the house can go into this trust, be used for their benefit, but not ever actually have to be considered an asset of your disabled or special needs loved one. What this does is allow them to still be able to keep their health insurance, their care, all the subsidies that they're getting from the government without ever having to risk clawback, going back to the state, where the state comes in after you pass or your loved one passes and really does put their hand in your pocket. The last example we have here is often one that we see pretty frequently. It could be something where they don't qualify even for supplemental needs or a special needs trust. It's not the issue where we have a child as an adult who may have had some kind of substance abuse problem. Maybe they have a mental health problem. Maybe they're just bad with money. We want to set up a way so that they can still be protected, especially because these people are often succumbing to scams. People are seeking them out to take advantage of them. One of the worst scenarios I have in this is a sweet young lady at 96 years old who'd really been taking care of her daughter who was in her 50s. She tried to set up things for her daughter to be super smooth, and she did to an extent, but she didn't want to get somebody involved because she only had one daughter left. And so she didn't want to use a professional trustee or a professional fiduciary to be able to administer her trust. And she didn't have anybody else that she could name, and so she named her daughter as her own trustee. The big problem that we saw with this was we knew that her daughter, who had quite a bit of disability, was going to be susceptible to scams. She got a little bit of income, she got a little bit of health insurance, and we could protect that. But then what happened is whenever her mom passed, it made the local paper, just like many of our parents will. You put that obituary out there, and sometimes that's a big red flag for these scam artists to come out of the woodwork. A gentleman that she hasn't met since high school, remember the daughter here was in her 50s, so probably 35, 40 years since they really hung out. comes and says, hey, I'd love to help you. I know you're in a time of need. And unfortunately, she says, I'd love your help. Let me get you to come in and figure out mom's finances and help me organize everything going forward. Within a couple months, that man had gotten her to give her money from the trust and then vanished. And so whenever that happened, because she was her own trustee, because it wasn't supplementally taken care of, she didn't have somebody to oversee and checks and balances her as the trustee. She got essentially scammed. It's not illegal because she technically gave the gift to the guy. And now she has far, far less to be able to support herself. She's not able to drive on her own. She can live on her own right now, but that'll probably change in the future. And arguably, that's not what her mom wanted. And because her mom didn't want to set up that professional fiduciary or set up somebody to oversee this for her daughter, there was arguably at least $1 to $3 million that her daughter will never be able to collect again. That's pretty crazy whenever you think about it. So there is some expense with setting this up. Usually a special needs trust is going to cost a couple $1,000s. But as you can see in this example, it's really important to go ahead and get these things going, because otherwise the health insurance, those extra subsidies, the caregivers that are provided by these programs won't be able to be utilized without coming out of pocket pretty substantially. Thank you guys so much. We definitely appreciate you tuning in here for Live with the Lawyer every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Again, I'm Josh Nelson with Nelson Elder Care Law, helping you protect yourself and the ones you love. Thanks so much.